what really piqued my interest is the tunnels that sat behind us. Now, all railway hotels had tunnels that led to the stations that they served. Typically, they were only used for royalty to board the train without hassle from the public, but in the 1990s, they filled the entire tunnel up with concrete, so there is no more connection to Regina Union Station. Now, from the outside today, the station actually looks pretty lively, with loads of freight traffic moving behind the century-old station. But following the 1990 government cuts to completely remove Regina off the transcontinental route, January of that year would see the final passengers arrive and check into the Hotel Saskatchewan, with some continuing on the final train west towards Calgary, Banff, and Vancouver, and some continuing east on the final train towards Winnipeg, Ottawa, and Montreal for the final time. At the turn of the 20th century, Saskatchewan was on the rise. The Canadian government, which helped fund the completion of the railway, was giving away land for free to any settlers with the promise of prosperity. Every small town had a grain elevator, and it was the railway that made them the center point of these small towns. And most of them still stand to this day, and you can actually see a lot of them on the northern route that the Canadian runs on today. But these trains carrying those people came to Canada here through Regina Union Station for a new life on the prairies. The Hotel Saskatchewan, and to be quite frank, this video would not exist without the vision of the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway and Charles Melville Hayes' vision to erect the Chateau Quapelle here in Regina. I covered this story in depth last episode in Prince Rupert, but Hayes was a true dreamer in every sense of the word. He envisioned a railway that would draw people to Canada because his route from Winnipeg to Prince Rupert was better in every way possible compared to the Canadian Pacific's through Banff, from the scenery to the experience, and especially with the network of the best, most luxurious railway hotels along the way that would draw wealthy travelers from Europe and Asia to come and experience them. And when you consider how incredibly well built the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa was, which was essentially Hayes' brainchild, and I ended up staying there back in February, or even the Fort Garry in Winnipeg and their Oval Room and Grand Lobby, or the Hotel Macdonald in Edmonton, and both the Mac and the Fort Garry were pretty much watered-down versions of the Chateau Laurier, to put it nicely. I can only imagine how stunning the Chateau Quapelle here in Regina would have been, and if he had succeeded in turning Prince Rupert, British Columbia, into the metropolis of the North like Vancouver is today, I'd like to think that Regina would have been a huge focus of his, just like Winnipeg was at the time of his passing, when he went down with the greatest ocean liner of his time, the Titanic, on April 15th of 1912 at 2 a.m. in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. Although Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier and his Liberal government backed Hayes' vision, when Prime Minister Robert Borden and the Conservatives came into power in 1911, they agreed to honor Laurier's deal, but on the terms that Hayes would now have to build west to east. And this may not seem like a big deal to most, but when you consider the biggest reason that the Canadian Pacific were so successful with their coast-to-coast railway being completed in 1885, it was because they built east to west and would open up service along the way as they built the route. But with Grand Trunk Pacific being forced to build west to east, and with less than 1 year later after losing their leader and their visionary in the North Atlantic, as well as the entire original furniture order from the Chateau Laurier, which still sits at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean today, and to paint context to the difficulty of building west to east, one of the reasons why I found that route to be so spectacular when I rode it a couple weeks ago, Hayes had blasted the grade of the route to basically zero, blasting completely flat to make it super easy on the trains, despite how steep some of these valleys were. And he was carving through rainforest, some of the densest forestry possible, along raging rivers and some of the most treacherous terrain, and the fact that he was going to build this route. Ultimately, we'll never know what could have happened to Regina if the Grand Trunk Pacific was able to execute their vision. And would today's video actually be staying at the Chateau Quapelle, or would the Hotel Saskatchewan have even been built? We'll never know.